Welcome back, SBT fans, to another Power Rankings video in the Week 7 of Season 6 SBT. I'm here joined with Tyler, the Canadian Kid.
What's up, guys?
Alright, so again, this is Week 7. You guys know how we roll. We're just going to list off our rankings for our challengers, guardians, victors, and conquerors, respectively. And without further ado, Tyler, you can reveal the bottom of Challengers Division.
Yeah. So starting off for PRs this week, at number 16 is going to be Nico and the Spartan Samurats for a third week in a row. And Nico didn't play his match. He had to forfeit against Harbor this week, so he stays at the bottom this week.
Yeah, not too much to say there. Nico and Harbor, they didn't get a chance to play their match. So moving right up to number 15 is Harbor and his No Point Snow Runs, who just got the forfeit win against Nico. And again, we can't say too much about that match. It didn't really happen, so we're just going to move up.
Next up at number 14, we've got Bolus and the Boston Blissies. And Bolus actually played Daniel this week. And it wasn't enough he didn't do enough to clutch out a W. It was very close. It was a 1-0. And he got very unlucky right at the end when he got
flinched. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, the Dark Pulse flinch on the Toxapex.
Yeah.
So that was very unfortunate, but it's Mons, it's the game we play. So unfortunately, Bolus has to stick at number 14 this week.
Yeah, I will say Bolus, he did get really unlucky, but I mean, he was banking on a lot of things not happening because he had to stall with Toxapex, like he had to recover stall. And luckily, he didn't really get crit too much, but a flinch was bound to happen, things of that nature. And him sacking off his Dracovish, really questionable, because I think Dracovish could have actually done more work than the Toxapex, but obviously Toxapex can just recover stall, so I guess he thought that was safer for him. Either way, Bolus got very unlucky at the end there, but he's going to just stick at number 14. Moving up to number 13, we got Zach and his Chicago Corviknights, who played against Rozzy this week. And, Rozzy pretty much had his number throughout the entire match. He didn't let up at all, especially with Zach not having really any kind of offensive pressure to break that Blissey. Like, I don't exactly know what Zach's... I didn't get to see his team builder at all, but... the Halucha dropping turn 1, not turn 1, but like turn 2 to the Kurum. He was Mold Breaker. I'm not sure if Mold Breaker was supposed to be for like Unaware Quagsire or something, but losing Halucha meant that he just really couldn't dent the Blissey at all. Blissey pretty much stalled the rest of his team. And when you get stalled by Blissey, it's just a rough time in general. You're always in the back end. Yeah, he just... sitting at number 13 last week, so he kind of just has to stick at number 13 again this week.
At number 12, we've got Sai and the Texas Toxtricities, and Sai lost to Cami this week with a 6-0 loss, so that's always unfortunate. But Cami, like we know, a very strong coach, and he's been at the top of D-League for quite a while now. He's very hard to play against, and Sai wasn't the one to knock out the Giant this week, as he got 6-0 and moved down 2 spots in the PRs.
Yeah, Sai was playing a very good match. I remember he actually made a couple predictions which were in his favor. He did a really good job trying to get the momentum back in his favor. But of course, Cammy always had responses. He had a lot of tech he needed to in the background. Bringing Defog Salmons, which is interesting, but I guess he really wanted Rotom Heat to be offensive this week, so he brought the Nasty Plot set, which did a lot of work in the beginning, and after that, Sai's team kind of just started breaking down, and he couldn't get back into the driver's seat. But moving up above him at number 11, we have Python and his Tennessee Toxtricities, who played against Ganon this week, and it was a really interesting match. To be fair, I think Ganon had the momentum throughout the entire match. In fact, I think he actually could have pulled off more than just a 3-0 at that point. But Python, he was kind of in the back end a lot. But his opponent Ganon really brought some interesting tech this week, and we'll talk about later when we speak on him. But Python just he couldn't preserve the stuff that he needed to in the late game, and that just cost him the match.
Next up at number 10, we've got Daniel and the My Horse. And with a win this week over Bolus, with that flinch, like we said earlier, he kind of under prepped for the Toxapex, which is a very hard month to break. So you really have to prep hard to be able to break it, because it's very, very tough and frustrating to deal with the Toxapex. And Daniel saw that firsthand, and he got lucky to beat it. But he was gonna get Toxic Recover stalled, but he got very lucky with that flinch at the end to win him the game. So he goes up one spot this week to number 10.
Yeah, moving up just one spot. Obviously getting pretty lucky, because when you have to face it against Stall, it's really not Toxapex. It's really like the support around Toxapex, because if you can just sub or taunt the Pex, then you should be okay. But of course, like if your opponent has support for it, then it becomes a bigger issue. But he was able to get that flinch at the end, which really helped him out and moved him up one spot. Moving above him at number 9, we have Wolf and his Brampton Ursaring, who faced off against George this week. And George did a really good job keeping all of Wolf's threats at bay. Like, he made sure that nothing got too out of hand. Wolf, unfortunately, had to keep counterplaying George in this match, and he was really trying to break that Skarmory. Like, the Skarmory was a big issue for Wolf. And he had to kind of stay in with Venusaur at certain times. Like, he had the Talonflame in the back, but even Talonflame, like, I don't know if it had the Flare Blitz. I don't know if I ever saw him use it, but he couldn't break the Skarmory at certain points, and it was hard for Wolf to kind of get around George's team. But he ends up losing that match, and he just drops the one spot. Of course, he was at number 8 last week, and he came down relatively close, especially to a coach that was higher up on the power rankings initially.
Next up at number 8, we've got Ganon and the Cranberry Crowbats. Ganon with a win over Python this week. A very interesting Greninja set.
Yes, I agree.
Brings him up 4 spots in this week's power rankings. Want to talk about that Greninja?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of understand where he was going with it, because I like the tech. I like that he used the roleplay Greninja to steal that speed boost off the Sharpedo, but it didn't really do much for him at all. Like, yeah, he got the +1 on Gren, but even then, like, it still wasn't enough to break some of
I mean, he just had nothing to deal with that Sharpedo alone, so
yeah,
Sharpedo actually took out the Greninja, which actually just canceled it out.
Exactly. Like, if maybe Greninja had like low kick or something, but what's interesting is that Sharpedo did bring Greninja down to Torrent range, which made his Hydro Pumps a lot stronger, but it still wasn't doing much. Like, the Auroraville was up, so he just wasn't. I think he pulled the trigger too early on with that roleplay Greninja. But it was a very nice set to bring. Like, I like seeing tech like that. When you can get creative, it means that you still have some things in the back, and you can pull them out, during the final weeks of the season. Ganon moves up 4 spots this week, like you said, and we can move up to John and his Dubai Drapion sitting at number 7. And we do have to say, a farewell to John and his Dubai Drapions for this season. A really strong contender for challengers, but he had other commitments, and that's quite respectable. So we do have to introduce a new coach joining challengers this season, and that's going to be Delta. And we hope to see a lot of good things from Delta. Of course, there's only 3 more weeks after this, but Delta still has some room to maybe climb into playoff contention. So, John, we wish you all the best. We can talk about his match really quickly. He had to face off against Tyler B this week, and unfortunately got 6-0'd. There's a lot of 6-0s going on in challengers, and I feel like it could be just under prep or just really strong prep on the opponent's side. But John, I think I don't know if he under prepped this week, but he really he really lost to that Charizard, and obviously, there's nothing wrong with it. Charizard's a very huge threat, especially having the belly drum again. Um, but yeah, John, we wish you all the best again, and I guess we can move on.
Next up at number 6, we've got Steph and the Ontario Lucarios. And Steph actually took a loss to Paco this week. And for a loss, so that was unfortunate, but that cost Steph 2 spots in the power rankings. And Paco actually played a very good game. He dealt with all of Steph's threats, made sure nothing was unable to beat him anymore, and he just took over from there.
Yeah, we can actually move up Steph up number 6. Of course, they played a really good game, but above Steph at number 5, we have Paco and his Charleston Gastrodons, who moves up 2 spots. Paco played a really nice game. I think I've been talking about Steph and his melodic throughout the season, and no one can break it. Paco was actually one of the ones that did break it, because Manaphy does get tail glow, so even if Manaphy sits in there, starts energy balling, melodic obviously eats those up. But if Manaphy starts tail glowing, the melodic starts having a bit of a problem, and I don't think the melodic actually really did anything for Steph in this match. But yeah, Paco definitely bringing setup sweepers to pressure Steph's team early on in the match, and then cleaning up late game with his other threats, notably like Exegrill and whatnot. He did a really good job, and it definitely deserves a boost in the ranks.
Next up at number 4, we've got Rozzy and 2 Spoons 1 Zam. Rozzy picking up a big win against Zach this week. Went up 1 spot in this week's PRs. That Kieran pretty much just went bananas on Zach's team, and he didn't really have much for it. The Blissey was very hard to deal with. The Quagsire just came in on the Hydreigon and took hits. Rocky Helmet chipped it enough to kill it at the end. Rozzy just had a very good prep that pretty much neutered all of Zach's threats, and it wasn't even a problem from there. Rozzy just smooth sailed through to a win.
It was really the Kyurem, like you said. The Kyurem was a huge threat for Zach, and he pretty much had to sacrifice his only offensive threat to break the Blissey and Hawlucha. And once Hawlucha went down, like we said, Blissey kind of just sat there. Quagsire kind of just sat there. The Kyurem really sat there as well, and just either clicked Earth Power or Sub or Freeze Dry. It was pretty much a wrap. Rozzy knew how to pressure Zach in that match. But moving up to our number 3 spot, we have George and his Tectonic Typhlosions, who got the win this week over Wolf. And like I was saying earlier on, his walls played a really strong role in this match. Skarmory, of course, just doing Skarmory things, just sitting in on the Venusaur. He even sat in on the Talonflame, which was really interesting to see. Like, when a Talonflame gets walled out by a Skarmory, that's a big issue. And then the Dragapult and Deancey obviously had did some work in that match. I really liked that he brought the Boltund. Wolf didn't exactly have too much to check the Boltund, besides the Venusaur, which obviously was low at that point. But I think George, he does a really good job each week. In fact, he was at number 3 last week, and he kind of sits there again, simply because the top 2, they're just doing phenomenally. Again, with both of them getting 6-0s again this week.
Yeah, so at number 2, we've got Cammy and the Loch Ness Lombres, and Cammy with another win this week. 6-0'd Sai, and like we said, it's pretty hard to deal with Cammy, and he's one of the top coaches in D-League. He's one of the only 2 undefeated coaches in the SBT right now, so it's very hard for all the coaches to deal with him right now. He's in his top form, and he's just sailing through, getting wins, and let's see who can stop him in the following weeks.
Yeah, I really respect the fact that he's another coach that's gone undefeated. And he's not even at number 1, which makes it even more interesting. because the top two I think are kind of in their own league right now. They're just on a roll. Obviously, we have coaches like Rozzy and Steph and even George as part of this Challengers division, but Tyler B and Cammy, they're definitely in a league right now above everyone else, and it's going to be interesting these last couple of weeks to see who actually takes them down. Like they're getting 6-0s nonstop, and at this point, that's what we want to see when going into playoffs. We need to see them at their best, and playoffs and challenges are going to be really, really strong this season, I think. So looking forward to see that. But moving above Cammy is Tyler B and his Villanova Torcats, who we just talked about. He got his 6-0, and another win with Belly Drum Zard, if I recall correctly. He really knows how to use his team defensively and into an offensive win in the late game. Whether it takes a certain amount of turns, of course, his regen core is very tough to deal with. And it's, you can't say too much about it. He just, he knows how to use his team well. He's been practicing, of course, and I can't wait to see him go into playoffs. There's no, like, unless he chokes really hard, like, there's no doubt he makes playoffs at this point. Okay, so that's Challengers Division for you guys. We can actually move up now to our Guardians Division, who we can talk about the bottom part of it, and Tyler, you can reveal it whenever you need.
Yeah, so next up at number 16 in the Guardians Division, we've got Piran and the St. Louis Scissors. Piran sticking down there for the second week in a row now. Piran lost to Aaron this week, unfortunately, and it was a pretty close match. Came down to 1-0, but unfortunately we could not see the match as that replay was lost in the Nether Realm or wherever it might be, and both coaches swear they saved it, but it's nowhere to be found. So we'll just go off their word, and we'll assume Aaron won this week.
Yeah, we can't really talk about a match that we couldn't see. So again, guys, whenever you want to play your matches, make sure you save the replays. Of course, we always want to see them to judge you guys. So moving above Piran at number 15, we have Ballistic and his Oregon Gold Ducks, who actually moves down 2 spots. He faced off against Gryon this week. Yeah, and it was actually a really strong showing from Ballistic, if I'm going to be honest, because he tried to prevent Grive from really spamming his Zapdos and Swampert, and he kept that Shaman alive in the end game, which was very smart on Ballistic's part. Even though he did lose this match, he does have to drop. I think he performed well, especially with the team that he went in with. He brought the what was it? The Rain Dish Blastoise, which was a nice bring to kind of counter like Swampert and Kingdra. It did a really good job there. And Shaman, of course, was a really nice counter with the Yachi Berry for the Swampert. Of course, it still wasn't enough because Ballistic was always in the defensive role and he couldn't really get any strong offensive pressure against his opponent. So a good hustle on Ballistic's end there, but it just wasn't enough in this matchup.
Next up at number 14, we've got Griffin and the Rem City Ride-Ons, and Griffin faced off against Goomba this week. Unfortunately, could not pull out the win. Griffin kind of having a rough season this season, but we all know that Griffin can turn it around at any given moment. He just needs to get back up on that horse and goes back to just grind that offense until it breaks through, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, hyper offense.
Pushed through.
Hyper offense is the name of Griffin's game for the most part, you always see it. If you let Griff get any kind of momentum with his core, he will do a lot of damage to you. But there's a lot of checks to Griffin, especially in this match he played against Goomba. Goomba was really smart. He knew that Griffin's team got demolished by Toxic Spikes. Hazards in general are just kind of terrible for Griff. Everything's grounded. Not too many spinners or defoggers. So he knew how to pressure him that way. And of course, Griffin just couldn't respond to a lot of stall after that. But moving above Griff, we have Ryan and his London Lucarios. who faced off against Cello this week. So I'll go. Ryan actually has to move down 3 spots from last week, and his match against Cello. Ryan did a good job pressuring Cello's team, but it really just wasn't enough this week, and he does have to drop. He has a lot of pressure on his team. He has the Ninetales, which I believe he picked up recently, and the Tornadus and the Infernate, but even that wasn't enough to really break down Cello's core, with it being like Mana Buzz and Glyphable and all those really bulky mons. So Ryan just has to stick at number 13 for this week.
Next up at number 12, we've got Celeb going the Copenhagen Canines, and Cello facing against Ryan this week, like we just said. Picked up the win, got the better end of that match, gained 2 spots in this week's PRs, and it was a great game overall. A lot of back and forth, but it was interesting to watch, and Cello just got the best of it.
Moving up to our number 11 spot, we got Goomba and his Detroit Dittos, who we just talked about earlier on. He moves up to 1 spot, only because, facing Griff, they were kind of already both at the bottom end of the PRs there. But Goomba moving up, again, like we said, he knew that entry hazards for Griff was very detrimental, so he just brought them, set them up, and then he went on from there, just continuously just spamming his stall mons. Did a good job in that role, in that respect. So he gets to move up 1 spot.
Next up at number 10, we've got Ghost in the Brisbane Zeraora, and Ghost played against Rin this week, and he actually won with a 2-0. Very interesting match, and if I remember correctly, it was the Latios who came in and did his job.
Mm-hmm.
But very interesting to see, as Ghost was actually ranked number 15 last week, and beating the number 3 seed in Rin gave him quite a few spots, moving him up 5 spots in this week's PRs, all the way up to number 10.
Yeah, it came down really close. It was a good match, and I think both coaches, they were kind of struggling to keep the offense up. And I think whenever something died, something else came in and then killed something else. It became kind of a war of attrition at that point. But they both played a really good match. Of course, Ghost ended up coming out with a win. But we can talk about his opponent above him at number 9. We have Rin and his Las Vegas Ludicolo's, who does have to drop 6 spots from his placement at number 3 from last week. And we just spoke on that. Rin, he played a good game. Fortunately, it was not enough, and Ghost was able to come out with a very convincing 2-0 on his end.
Next up at number 8, we've got Nathan and the Charlotte Chimchars. And Nathan played Sacred this week, but couldn't pull out the win. So that loss brings him down 2 spots in this week's PRs. And it was a very interesting match, as Sacred pretty much kept his checks in the back. He made sure to whittle down Nathan's team enough to the point where Volcarona could just come in, get that +1 off with the Fiery Dance, and just clean from there. And Nathan didn't really have much at that point, since his team was pretty much worn down. But it was a very nice match to watch.
Yeah, I agree completely. His opponent, Nathan's opponent this week in Sacred, he really knows how to use Volcarona. I believe he got a 6-0 sweep last week with it. So, I think Nathan still has a really good chance to climb into potential playoffs. He's doing very well in the season. Of course, he's kind of sticking around that middle area where he's number 8, some weeks number 6, other weeks. But he's definitely going to keep climbing. I know there's a couple more weeks left. Nathan definitely just needs to get back into his zone. But yeah, we can move up to our number 7 spot in Aaron and his Los Santos Septiles, who of course, we didn't get to see it, but both coaches say that it came down close. It came down to a 1-0, and Aaron got that win. So We do have to move him up to our number 7, just for the sake of shuffling people around. We didn't get to see it, but of course, if he did win, he gets to move up 1 spot.
Next up at number 6, we've got Quality in the Karokoffs. And Quality faced off against Wavali this week. Very interesting to see 2 of the top guys fighting. And it's always a nice match when it happens. And that one was a very good match as well. Unfortunately, Quality lost that one. And that loss dropped him 1 spot in the power rankings.
Yeah, definitely a good match to watch. Again, the 2 of our top contenders there. And Wavali, we'll talk about him later, but I believe it's never easy to go up against Wavali, especially when he really knows how to use that Mega Gallade. He's been number 1 in the PRs for multiple weeks already, so you always have to be on your A game playing against him, and I feel like there should be no consideration to under-prepping at all, especially at this point in the season. But moving up to our number 5th spot, we got Swampy and his Seattle Swamperts, who dropped 3 spots this week from facing a new coach, which, by the way, we need to address, guys, is that ex-gamer Pokestar and his Nevada Dunsparce actually join us for this season. We do have to say goodbye to a major comeback, unfortunately, last week. And, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but we are, we are welcoming ex-gamer to the SBT. We hope, he enjoys the competition that he's in Guardians. And he's already proving himself well. He faced off against Swampy this week, and he ended up with a very nice win. So you can already tell that he's definitely a contender, and Swampy, he kind of came out with a short end of the stick in this match. Tyler, do you have any words on this match particularly?
Not necessarily. Just glad to see that ex-gamer actually won his first match in the league. It's always fun and relieving for a coach when you come in, don't know what to expect, and clutch a big win against one of the top guys. Next up at number 4, we've got Sacred TD in the Los Angeles Dodrio. And like I said earlier, Sacred got a very nice match against Nathan. Whittled down the entire team until Volcarona could just come in, get that +1 and sweep. And that game got him 5 spots in this week's PRs all the way up to number 4.
Yeah, moving up 5 spots, and that's more or less because a lot of the top coaches like Swampy and Quality lost their matches, but Sacred definitely deserves to be sitting up at top when he faces off against one of the stronger coaches in Guardians this season in Nathan. But moving up to our number 3, we have ex-gamer Pokestar, which of course we just mentioned. Lucky to have him into the league. Lucky to see a couple of his new tech and his toys. We got to see a few for his upcoming match, which I won't spoil. But he moves up 4 spots into the number 3. Now I know that that's a very big move considering he just got into the league. But when you take down Swampy, you definitely have to give him some respect. So sitting at number 3 for right now.
Next up at number 2, we've got Gryon and the Peterborough Palpitoads. Gryon played Ballistic this week and got the 2-0 win. And like you said earlier, the rain team was just too much in the end to handle for Ballistic. He gave it a really good try. It was very close, and Ballistic pretty much handled it very well. But after a while, it was just too much, and Gryon just went through. And even if he didn't have rain in the end, the threats were just too much for Ballistic to handle, and that put Gryon up 2 spots all the way up to number 2 in this week's PRs.
I agree. I think the matchup completely overhauled the fact that Ballistic was trying to come back in that late game. He had strong wall breakers in Kingdra in the rain. It did some heavy damage to Ballistic's team. Gryon honestly just bringing the heat sets, the powerful sets. Zapdos, he found out after a few things went down that Gryon could just spam Hurricane and Thunder with Zapdos in the rain. It was a really powerful threat. And the Swampert set made sure that even when the Shaman came in at the end game, he would be safe from a grass type move. So Gry. He sits at number 2. He's always been sitting up at the top there, and of course he has a really strong team. So he's going to be a very big threat, especially going into playoffs. But moving up to our number 1, which we've mentioned already, we have Wee Valley and the Seattle Pre-Mariners, who won this week against Quality, like we were talking about, and beating out a coach that was sitting really high up on the rankings already. That bodes really well for how the rest of the season is going to go, especially going into playoffs. He might be gunning for that number 1 seed to get that bye, and then of course getting the promotion afterwards. We're really interested to see how he does for the rest of the season. Of course, it's going to be a really strong playoffs season. I already said that for challengers, but looks like Guardians is going to be equally as tough. But with that, we can close off Guardians and move up to Victors. Tyler, if you want to start us off.
So first off, number 16 in the Victors Division for the second week in a row is going to be Gene and the Ottawa Gengars. Gene actually got a loss to Miles this week. Very unfortunate turn 1 with a hydro pump miss on the Terrakion. The double scarf got Miles, and Miles was not expecting it, but unfortunately Gene missed and got OPO'd by the close combat, and it all went downhill from there.
Yeah, very, very unfortunate to miss a turn 1 move, especially when Gene knew that he could spam it early on, and then just getting wrecked by Terrakion afterwards. Gene unfortunately has to sit really, really low in the PRs again this week. But I know he's starting to get his groove back, and I don't think he's dropped the ball at all in his preps, but I think he's been getting kind of unlucky, and that happens in Mons. It's not the most fair game in the world, but of course I know Gene can come back. I think he still has room to come back into if not playoff contention, perhaps just into staying in the Victors Division. But we'll have to see. So moving up to number 15 is not Adam and his Arson and Bombs, who did end up losing this week, and he ended up losing against Juke in a 1-0. It came down really close, and I think there were circumstances where Adam could have taken that match home. But of course, he was already sitting at number 15 last week, so he kind of just has to stick at the bottom for right now.
Next up at number 14, we've got Photon and the Nevada Necrozmas. Photon actually played against Rummy, was it this week? Yeah. Photon played against Rummy this week, and unfortunately could not win. It was a very interesting match, but Rummy just had too much checks. The Melmetal was very tough to deal with, and it always is. When you underprep for a Melmetal, it never goes well. And Photon losing 4-0 this week, going down 2 spots in the PRs.
Yeah, it's very tough, especially when Photon's check to Melmetal is things like Melodic, which of course Rummy has a really strong answer to in Venusaur. So it becomes a big struggle when he has to face off against Melmetal. I think he did play a really nice game, but Rummy had the edge in that match. So moving up to our number 13, we have Crow and his Virginia Victinis, who lost his match this week against Leonard, and he does have to drop a few spots there. I believe Crow actually played a really strong match this week, but I think Leonard actually out-prepped him, and it came down to a 4-0. It came down to a 2-0, so it was pretty close, but it just wasn't in Crow's favor this week.
Next up at number 12, we've got Leonard and Diazel Falkmar. And like we just said, Leonard just out-prepped Crow this week and claimed the W to go up 2 spots in this week's PRs.
Yeah, so moving up to our number 11, we got Aaron the Baron and his Colchester Cobalions, who actually ended up losing this week Seeing Aaron so low in the PRs at this point in the season seems very hectic, because I'm assuming Aaron's struggling to keep up with his playoff contention spot. There are a lot of good coaches and victors this season who deserve some recognition going into playoffs. Aaron's obviously trying to keep his spot going in there, but he ended up losing his match this week against Witchard, and Witchard played a really strong match against him, if I remember correctly, and he just didn't get the momentum he needed. Witchard, of course, got a lot of momentum. Most of his team, in fact, can become pivots, and Aaron just he couldn't find his footing that match, and ended up dropping the 2-0 against Witchard.
Next up at number 10, we've got Juke in the Malibu Morlul. Juke played Adam this week, ended in a close 1-0, and always fun to see close matches like that. And it came down to the wire, to the very last mon, and it was very interesting. A lot of back and forth, but there was no real setup, and Juke pretty much just wore down Adam's team enough to get the last kills and get the W, and he stays put in this week's PRs.
Yeah, I agree. I believe Juke was actually messaging me after the match. He wanted to bring some really heat sets for the match. I think he wanted to bring Phalanx. I'm not going to reveal the set, of course, but it was very interesting to see. And of course, Juke is always creative like that. He likes to create some unanticipated sets, which could potentially throw off his opponent. So if he keeps going at this rate, he can definitely climb into playoff contention. It's weird to see Juke this low, especially when he has like a few wins under his belt. But again, Juke's only playing against coaches that were sitting pretty low in the PRs to begin with. So until he faces off against coaches that are slightly stronger and in a better position, we can't really move him up too high. In fact, he has to just stay at the same spot he was last week. But moving up to our number 9th spot, we have Witchard and his Superior Snom, who moves up 2 spots, like we said, because he faced off against Aaron, and he did a really good job in that match. He made sure everything was low enough to the point where his mons could clean up in the late game. Witchard finally getting some momentum going into playoffs this season. He's sitting pretty. He's sitting pretty at the number 9th spot. It's no number 6 or number 5, but he's definitely climbing. And I don't know if he wants to stop exactly. I think his goal or his intention at this point in the season is to not demote, which is a very good goal. He could always aim higher and still try to make playoffs, but I think at this point it's pretty hard, especially with his record. But who knows? It's Witchard. He pulls stuff out of nowhere sometimes, so we'll just have to see.
Yeah, for sure. It's never impossible, even when it seems tough. Never give up. You might just push through it, and it's always a close race anyways, so it's never, like I said, it's never impossible. Just keep pushing, and playoffs are always realistic.
Yep.
So next up at number 8, we've got Ampha in the Minnesota Twin Eagles, and Ampha actually lost to Raven this week, 3-0, which was a very nice match, and he just could not break Raven's super stall team, and that brings him down 7 spots in this week's PRs to number 8.
Yeah, again, Ampha dropping all the way down to 8 when he's been sitting at number 1, number 2, number 3 for the last couple weeks. Ampha, I guess he wasn't expecting to exactly go undefeated, but Raven was sitting pretty low at PRs last week, especially with him losing to Witchard. Raven, of course, is not by any means like a pushover of a coach. He's really strong, but his team again is just pure fatness, and I guess it was just Ampha's downfall having to face off against it because he didn't have enough breaking power. And Raven, of course, made sure that his opponent did not get any of the momentum he needed to set up on him. So Ampha, of course, has to sit there. And we're talking about Raven. We can actually move up to our number 7, and we can talk about Raven and his Destin Lucarios, who ended up with the win and moving up 6 spots. Raven, of course, trying to climb into that playoff contention spot. He's been doing really well throughout most of the season, of course. His record should prove that. But it's going to be really close for him getting into playoffs. He played against ANFA, and beating out the potentially number 1 seed in Victors is a good sign that you might still have a shot at making playoffs. So Raven, just keep pushing forward, and I know that you'll prevail.
Next up at number 6, we've got Rummy and the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, and Rummy playing Photon this week. Like I said, Melmetal can always be a lot of trouble to deal with, and Rummy actually going up 2 spots with this win again in this week's PRs. And Rummy's really been climbing in the last weeks, which is very fun to see. Rummy's always been a good coach, and seems like he's finally gotten the hang of his team.
Yeah, Rummy actually on a 3-game win streak, which is really good to see. I love seeing Rummy's interesting sets and what he can come up with, and him actually beating out Photon is a really respectable and commendable on his part. Rummy, he's a veteran in B League, similar to how other coaches like Miles are veterans in this B League. They've kind of just been, I believe, if memory serves, Rummy's actually been in B League for the last 4 seasons. He's gotten kind of on that level at this point, so it's really great to see him climb, and I hope he can continue and potentially make playoffs. But moving above him, at number 5, we have Risso and his Hell Creek Head Smash, who actually did lose his match this week against Joel. Joel, a really strong contender in Victors this season, but Riss, of course, a really strong team that he has, and I believe it came down really close. Like, it came down to a 1-0. And I think there were certain sets that had you brought, it could have ended differently.
Oh yeah, it was the Weavile. Weavile messed up his team pretty bad, and then Lope just came in and cleaned in the end.
Oh, Lopney came in the end. Yeah, I remember that. Okay. Yeah, so of course, with that, Riss just has to move down the 1 spot. He was sitting at number 4 last week, and Joel, he's climbing up in the rankings. He was at number 6, so Riss doesn't move down too far, especially with that match being so close. But we can move up.
Next up is Pierre at number 4 with the Pittsburgh Pussycats, and we can't really talk about that match since it didn't happen. Unfortunately, Pierre had to forfeit due to having a busy life, and hopefully he can come back and pick up where he left off and keep the win streak going.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed to not see that match. Of course, Pierre versus PZZ would have been a very strong showing. Perhaps we could still see that in playoffs, but that would have been the battle for either number 1 or number 2 spot. But we can't really talk about it. Of course, other people have priorities, so nothing against anyone. But we could actually move up to our number 3 spot, who we were talking about earlier, in Joel and his Kattegat Corver Knights, who move up 3 spots due to his win against Pierre this week. Riss this week. And again, beating out Riss it's so late in the season at this point, very good for your standing and for your potential playoff contention. And like Tyler said earlier, he pretty much broke Riz's team with that Weavile and sent in the Lopunny to clean in late game, which did a really good job, especially against Riz, who loves to bring screens, loves to bring some interesting tech to make sure that his opponent doesn't get all the momentum. But Joel, he was just 1 step ahead. The matchup was definitely in his favor, and he gets to move up. He gets to move up to that number 3 spot.
Next up at number 2, we've got PZZ and the Seattle Sharpedos, and PZZ got the forfeit win against Pierre this week. Unfortunately, we did not get to see that battle, but PZZ moves up 3 spots and takes the number 2 spot for this week.
Yeah, like we were saying, I would have loved to see that match, but it didn't happen. PZZ always sitting at the top 5, so it's no surprise that he sit at number 2 right now. Of course, the match didn't happen, but he still moves up 3 spots just due to the fact that a lot of the coaches beneath him kind of lost this week. So we can't really move him down, especially when he did end up getting the forfeit win. But moving up to our number 1 spot, we're going to like seeing Miles and his Bakersfield Bearticks set up the number 1 with his win this week against Gene. And of course, Gene was sitting at the bottom last week, but we kind of just had to move Miles up. You know, his squad was able to get the better of Gene's, and even with the miss at the beginning, I believe Miles still had a lot of responses for Gene. But it's really nice to see Miles sit up there again. I believe in week 5 he was also sitting at the number 1 spot. Miles, again, like I was talking about earlier, a veteran in B League and now Victors, and really interested to see if he can pull out the number 1 seed and potentially promote into Conquerors, which we can wrap up Victors right now and move up to Conquerors. And Tyler, if you want to start us off.
So starting off Conquerors at number 16 is going to be Star and the Lucky Liberos. Star actually faced Beatergate this week, and the downfall of having such a defensive draft is that, like we could see in that match, Beater literally had setup on every single mon, whether it was power up punch or a pure setup move like Nasty Plot Rotom or whatever. It just sets up in front of your face and it hits hard, so Star really didn't have anything to check that, and Beater just pretty much demolished him that match.
Yeah, Star very weak to set up. You know, even with having an unaware Clefable, there's things around unaware at this point, and of course, being really slow as well is not the best, because it just means that your opponent can take advantage of how bulky and slow you are. So bringing things like Nasty Plot Rotom, but he does have to set up that number 16 spot, unfortunately. But moving up to our number 15, we have Jay and his Springfield Stallers, who did end up losing his match to me. It came down really close, though. You know, he played a really strong game towards the late game. But his team is very unfortunate to the fact that because when he got into the league, his team, he couldn't exactly choose the proper team to go into the rest of the season. So, you know, there were a lot of flaws. Things like his team was really weak to Ghost. Like, I brought Specs Hex against Jay's team just because his team doesn't like Ghost spam, Dark spam. And that's kind of why he has the Mega Kangaskhan there, which is a really strong force. I like that he brought the Kangaskhan very offensive this week to take on my answer being Runerigus, so he brought the Aqua Tail. And you know, he did a really strong endgame where he was preserving the Aegislash in the back to make sure that Kyurem didn't set up and sweep him. And of course, he ended up getting paralyzed, but you know, Melmetal was a Soulfest anyways, and he was just Flash Cannon and Shadow Ball, so that match definitely would have ended up with Melmetal winning out. But it ended up still being a 1-0, so a very strong showing for Jay. And you know, there's still a couple more weeks, so hopefully he can actually win out.
Next up at number 14, we've got Zombie and the Victoria Victinis. Zombie finally going down from that number 9 spot, dropping 5 spots following that 6-0 loss to Chris. Very unfortunate hacks that match. I think Zombie missed like 2 or 3 hurricanes, and I mean, it happens when you run inaccurate moves, but when it happens all the time during one match, it's pretty frustrating. And Zombie got a pretty bad end and moved down 5 spots on the PRs this week.
Yeah, very unfortunate for Zombie. You know, he just hasn't been having the best season. Everyone knows how good of a coach Zombie is. Like, even with any team he goes in, I believe, and even in the beginning of the season, like Zombie was using that team really efficiently. I actually really enjoyed his draft in the beginning of the season, but he changed it up. I guess he's more comfortable with what he has now, but it just hasn't been working for him, unfortunately. And you know, the hacks, of course, was just not in his favor. Speaking of hacks, moving up to our number 13, we got Stumbles and his Cleveland Creselias. And I want to speak on his match, but I also want to speak on the fact that the reason he dropped so low was just due to a blunder that Tyler and I had noticed after the fact with Week 6 power rankings. Um, you see Stumble sitting at number 6 last week and Cheese at number 8. They ended up playing their match, which we didn't take into consideration. But if we were to have changed anything, we would have switched Stumbles and Cheese. Stumbles would have sat at number 8 and Cheese would have sat at number 6. So that's why Stumbles ends up at number 13 there. He ends up dropping not the 7 spots that you see, but really just the 5 spots. Because Stumbles did end up facing Piranha and getting 5-0'd this week. And really not the best, especially when you're facing a coach that was already sitting pretty low on the power rankings at number 15. Getting 5-0'd. I understand the Hacks was just gigantic that match. I believe there was Hurricane misses. There was there Hurricane misses? I know that there was Super Fang misses and Nature's Madness misses.
Yeah.
But it just
it's like 5 in total combined. It was very unfortunate to see.
Very, very unfortunate. And Piranha, he's been doing well for the last couple of weeks. Like, even if he hasn't been getting the win, he's been getting really close. So, of course, when the Hacks isn't in your favor and Piranha striving to get a win, Stumbles just has to. Stumbles takes an L this week.
Next up at number 12, we've got Piranha and the Washington Walreins. The other end of that match, like we said, Piranha got a 5-0, which was a pretty good score against a coach that was high ranked, but we couldn't really justify bringing him up so much because the amount of hacks that this match contained was pretty absurd. And even though he won, I'm not going to say he didn't deserve it because he did, but it's unfortunate, and we could only really justify the 3 spots he gained to number 12.
Which is still pretty decent, considering Piranha's kind of been sitting at the low end for the most of the season. Number 15, number 16 in that. But sitting at number 12, of course, it isn't too bad for him. He could potentially keep climbing up, and that's going to be really nice. But above him, we can move on to Beater and his DC Darmanitan at number 11. Who ended up getting the win this week, and we were just talking about it earlier. He got the win against Star. Now you can see that he hasn't actually moved, and that's just due to the fact that not only did he face the lowest seed in the standings, but it's also because the coaches above him, we couldn't justify moving Beater above anyone else. Everyone else played their matches outstandingly, and they've been doing an incredible season. As much as we really wanted to move Beater up, it just didn't feel well with the rest of the coaches, and you'll see why later when we move up.
So next up at number 10, we've got Toxis and the Texas Tornadoes. Toxic dropping a massive 8 spots this week after a loss against Skyquake, and pretty unfortunate when you see it's pretty nice when you see one of the bottom coaches beat one of the top coaches, and Toxic been sitting at the top for quite a while now, top of the standings as well as the power rankings leaderboard, and Skyquake, who's been having a very difficult season, beating Toxic must bring him back a pretty big confidence boost, and that's what we like to see.
Yeah, precisely. I have to agree with coaches beating out coaches that were higher up in the PRs. Sky definitely deserving some praise now. Beating out arguably one of the top seeds in Conquerors and Toxic, and I think it was a pretty convincing showing. Toxic, he did a good job in the match. I just don't think he was ready for Sky's offense, and I think moving down Toxic this low, it's really tough to see him that low because obviously, we'll know that he'll get a couple more wins before the end of this season. But, if he loses to one of the bottom seeds, it's a little bit tough to keep him so high up, especially with the coaches that we have going above him, which we can reveal in our number 9th spot, and Tyler and his Winnipeg Weavile. You did end up losing your match this week at 2-0. against Techno, and it came down really close, if I remember correctly. Tyler, if you want to talk about it for a little bit.
Yeah, it was a pretty close match, but unfortunately, I just pretty much under prep got caught, and it was a very interesting match, but I just couldn't really find a way to break the Arcanine, and I sacked my check in Rhyperior way too fast, and it all went downhill from there. I pretty much brought it back, even though I went on the back foot pretty early in the match, but there was just nothing I could do, and even though I came pretty close, Techno won that one.
Yeah, for sure. I think I agree with you that the Rhyperior going down kind of early sort of hurt you in the end game, because Tapu Koko again was a big threat for your team, and losing the Rhyperior, which would have been a very nice check so early on, it didn't exactly help for the end game. So Tyler moves down a few spots.
So next up at number 8, we've got Skyquake and the Lancaster Landorus. Skyquake with a win this week against Toxic. Very interesting to see. Number 13 beating out number 2. Very good match with a 3-0. Skyquake going up 5 spots. That's what we like to see.
I agree. Sky definitely moving up now, and that's great, because in the beginning of the season we had him at number 1, and maybe it was just a little bit too much pressure, but there's a lot of coaches that he had to go through before he could actually prove it. He's actually starting to get on this win streak that he has now, but he did end up losing last week, but he's starting to finally pick up some kind of pace, especially beating out the the number 2 seed from last week, and he has to move up for sure. So he's going to be at number 8. We can move up to number 7, and Techno and his Texas Magnemites, who we spoke on your match with Techno, Tyler. He moves up 4 spots. I think he played a really strong match. We already talked about it. Like you said, he preserved the Arcanine very properly. And the Tapu Koko was a huge threat, and Techno, he's been kind of sitting in the middle of the pack lately. I believe he still has a really strong chance to make playoffs. It's Conquerors, of course, is always really close when it comes to playoffs. A lot of coaches are 4-3, going into maybe 5-3 or 4-4, and I think Techno, if he continues to persevere, like this match came down really close to a 1-0. So yeah, if he just continues on like this, he may be able to sneak in the playoffs, which would be really nice to see. Our reigning champ get back into playoffs, but Techno, hopefully he can continue on a win streak of his own.
Next up at number 6, we've got Simi and the Blue Collar Blossoms. Simi had a very great match this week, 6-0ing Zombie. And even though that match didn't finish, it was going to be over in a few turns, as Mew had just clicked Nasty Plot and was pretty much just going to claim kills until the end. And 6-0ing Zombie is always a very good thing. We like to see it. Simi actually pulled it off this week, so props to Simi, going up 6 spots to number 6.
Yeah, I'm glad. I believe Simi's been doing really well with his Mew as of late. It's been climbing the kill leaders, and I'm glad he knows how to use that, because Mew is a very, very good mon, but also very tough to kind of build sometimes, just because of the fact that it can do anything. And a lot of the times you really just need to build the rest of your team before you can build Mew. But the fact that he can concentrate Mew on being a setup suit weeper, it does make it seem like the rest of his team is very much supportive to that Mew. And Simi, I'm glad he's climbing now. He's been kind of sitting pretty close to the end of PRs lately. In fact, I think this is one of the first weeks he's climbed out of the bottom, the bottom 6. So climbing into our 6th spot, then Simi, it's nice to see him there, and I play him this week coming up, so it's going to be a really tough match. But moving up to our number 5 spot, we have Cheese and his Michigan Manectrix, who, even though you see that he lost there, he does end up moving up 3 spots, just because we're trying to compensate for our blunder last week with Cheese and Stumbles kind of mixed up, when we didn't compensate for their match. So he would have technically have been at number 6 there, and he did lose his match this week, and it was against Zane. It came down really close though, and we can't really justify moving him too low, so he kind of just had to move up one, just because of the fact that a lot of the coaches, in the middle of that area, honestly lost their matches. So it becomes just a way of shuffling around, and we know Cheese is already a strong coach. Like, he's been in the top 5 before, so we think that he actually just deserves that spot at number 5.
Next up at number 4, we've got Slick and the Tip Down Timbers. By the way, we've got a warm welcome for Slick, and always fun to see new blood in the league. Unfortunately, Ominous had to drop. Slick taking over, facing Eagle his first week in the league. Eagle currently sitting pretty high in the PRs and sitting pretty high in the league standings as well. Unfortunately, Slick could not win his first game in the league. Came down very close, and my God, were there a lot of hacks in that match. But that's besides the point, because Slick just stayed at the same spot for having a great match, even with all the hacks. And
I agree.
Didn't really make him lose, nor did it make Eagle win. It was pretty even hacks, but there was a lot on both sides.
What's interesting is when the match had begun, I actually thought that Slick Panther had the better matchup. But of course, you can never, like, even going into a matchup that you might have, in your favor against Eagle. Whenever you play against Eagle, you always have to make sure to not get caught off guard, because Eagle always knows. He constantly thinks about the late game, I feel. And if he gets rid of a certain threat or a wall of yours, he knows that in the end game he can span his win con. So Eagle always a gigantic threat to face, and Slick having to face him week 1 coming into the league was definitely unfortunate for him, but it came down really close, and so we know that Slick is definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with for the rest of the season. And he has Ominous's record, so he's 4-3 at this point. So he still has a lot of potential to climb into playoffs, so we can hopefully expect that from him. But moving up to our number 3 spot, we have Zane and his St. Louis Cardinals, who moves up 2 spots. Zane finally climbing back up into the top 3. For a while there, he started dropping down below the 5th spot, and it was kind of getting a little bit scary for him. But Zane climbing back up again. He has a very strong team, and a team that, of course, we know can outclass and have a good matchup against certain players. Zane faced off against Cheese, like we said, this week, and he did a really good job at breaking down his team and getting the momentum he needed in the end game.
Next up at number 2, we've got Eagle and the Ottawa Raptors. Eagle facing Slick last week. Like I said, very haxy match. Was almost a trade 1-for-1 mon, and it was pretty fun to watch. Exciting to see new coaches, like I said, and Slick's first match. Unfortunately, Eagle had to take that win away from him and get up 1 spot in this week's PRs.
Yeah, Eagle. It's funny to see how far Eagles come from the beginning of the season. And I know that Eagle is always a great coach, and he's finally starting to climb up all the way to the top. Again, really good coach. He actually has to take over Toxic's spot this week, just because of the fact that Toxic ended up losing. But Eagle climbing up pretty close and pretty scary to my standing, because it might mean that he takes over the numbers 1 spot, which we can move up to is me and the Durham Dragonaires again, and sitting at number 1. And I ended up beating Jay this week. Again, I'm not gonna say how much it how well I did against that match, just because of the fact that I actually almost lost. Jay's a really good coach, and He found a lot of opportunities during my plays to kind of take advantage of me, especially with his Kangaskhan, which, to be fair, Mega Kangaskhan, I didn't have too many responses for. Um, you know, Having Medicham is really nice. I have a Mega Medicham which can take on the Kangaskhan, but of course they speed tie anyways, and it gets Sucker Punch. That wasn't the actual problem though. The problem was that Jay's team has a lot of he has all the answers to Mega Medicham, which is why I couldn't justify bringing it. He has Aegislash, he has things like Tapu Lele, which could have been Scarfed. He has Dragapult, which just outright outspeeds and one shots. There was just too much going on. So Jay's team is very offensive when it comes to that, like having Psychic spam, Ghost spam, very good in that regard. And I saw that coming in prep because, of course, it's just a huge threat in general. So I had to bring like 2 Assault Vest Mons in Melmetal and Drapion, and it was really close. I definitely clutched out saving Melmetal healthy in the end game to take on Aegislash, but otherwise, if he was very offensive with like close combat, Aegislash might have been able to take me out. So a good game to Jay, but I think that's gonna be it. We're gonna wrap up Conquerors. Tyler, you have any words?
Nope, that's it for this week.
All right, so that's gonna be it, guys. This is gonna be us signing off. We hope you enjoyed Week 7 power rankings this week, and look forward to. We only have 3 more videos coming your way for this season, but that's gonna be it, guys. Take it easy.